They are using all kinds of symbology as part of their operation.
George Bush is picking up where Adolf Hitler left off.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind: peace and security, freedom, and the rule of law.
War has been declared upon the United States of America and everybody in it. This war has been declared by the evilarchy that controls this country, the Cassius cartel, the American Illuminazi, the powers that be. Why would they trade the World Trade Center for world government? Because they want it all. There isn't anything that you have, or ever had, or ever hope to have, they're not planning on taking away. They plan to kill you, control you, or incarcerate you. And it's soon, because the people don't have a foggy idea, not the foggiest, about what's really going down. What's going down is this country, and it's going down now. If you liked what Hitler did, you're going to love what Bush is doing. Baby Bush doesn't have the personality, he doesn't have the guts, he is a wimp. He is not a leader. He's a follower of the Faustian financial fraternity who's orchestrating all of this. He's Daddy Bush's baby boy. He laid nude in the coffin at the Skull and Bones, along with his grandfather, Senator Prescott Bush. And they were born again into a satanic order. Take a look at the movie Skulls. Does the fraternity exist? Yes. It came here in 1832 as part of the Illuminati. But we have an Illuminazi, a group of people who want to rule the world. Hitler's second book was The World Order, the New World Order. Bush and company, the Council on Foreign Relations crowd, are trying to establish today what Hitler established yesterday. But Hitler's been demonized, and Bush is being praised. Some of the polls are saying that 85% of the people want a national ID card for their protection. They want what Hitler delivered. They want to fall in line and get in the goose step. We have a Gestapo in this country. Homeland Security, Deutschland Security. Who financed Hitler in the first place? Brown Brothers Harriman out of New York City, Union Bank. Oh, there's the partner to Brown Brothers Harriman, Senator Prescott Bush. They underwrote the Fuhrer, and the policies that were laid down by Adolf Hitler are being laid down
is a purely industrial, fascist, Nazi idea. So when you hear the word New World Order, understand it is a Nazi, National Socialist, Nazi movement. And I am appalled of how many people will listen to George Bush, the president, or George Bush's father, talk about a new world order and not remember that this is precisely what Adolf Hitler was trying to establish.
Bill, you've heard an awful lot of dramatic speeches and seen dramatic moments in times of great gravity for the nation. How would you assess this evening?
Well, first of all, notice that he is hugging the majority leader, a Democrat of the United States Senate, Tom Daschle, in a clear display of bipartisanship. This was a stirring address, in my view, shorter than his father's speech when he announced the New World Order. This was a stirring address, in my view, shorter than his father's speech when he announced the New World Order, shorter than his father's speech when he announced the New World Order after Iraq invaded Kuwait.
George Bush wants world war to bring about world government. I mean, nobody was going to attack the United States to bring it about. So they had to create an incident, like they did with the Maine in the beginning of the Spanish-American War, the sinking of the Lusitania, the setup of the Japanese, the aiding and abetting of the military forces that were then provoked and said that they had to get out of Manchuria within 90 days and their oil was going to be shut off. Franklin Delano Roosevelt knew that the Japanese were coming across the Pacific. The Purple Code was broken 6 months in advance. He knew exactly what the hell was happening. He moved the fleet from San Diego to Pearl Harbor. They dismantled the radar. That war was known. It was wanted because the President of the United States couldn't get Congress to declare war against Adolf Hitler. And Hitler was financed by whom? The Bush family, the big boys, the Cassius cartel. Where do you think Adolf got his money?
In Time magazine, we see the symbols on the side, on both sides of the speaker's podium where the president is standing. The point I'm making is that, yes, this is Time magazine with bin Laden on the cover. We're talking about the big enemy, the big enemy. I will assure you bin Laden is not the enemy. Let me show you what the enemy really is. But if you understand symbolism, Nazi, fascist symbolism, you will notice on each side of the presidential podium two interesting, perhaps 5-foot-high symbols on each side of the podium where the president stands. This is what is referred to as a fasci, a bundle of sticks with a hatchet head. Now, what is the importance of a fasci? This is a symbol of Nazi fascism. The stuff that so many good Americans went to war in Second World War to defend the free countries of the world against Nazis and fascists. And why is the symbol of Nazism, fascism, on the presidential podium where the president stands to give his State of the Union address? We see Roman fasces, the symbol of international fascism. Somebody better start waking up and finding out bin Laden is not our enemy. This man is not your enemy. Here is the enemy. The symbols of world fascism, Nazism, the mace itself. One needs to understand that in the United States Senate there is a symbol called the mace. This mace is a Nazi fascist symbol. It comes out of the ancient Roman Empire. The fasci symbols of the bundle of sticks with a hatchet head comes out of the Roman fascist system in Europe. So if we have an enemy, you can bet your bottom dollar here is the enemy. There's this whole thing about bin Laden being the dirty, rotten enemy. I think before we jump on the bandwagon and believe anything that comes out of Washington, D.C., I mean, we have had over and over and over again proven to us the lies, deception, hypocrisy, the conspiracies against this country hatched in Washington, D.C. Anyone who knows anything about government, and I've spent 42 years, day in and day out, looking, researching, and studying occultism, conspiracies in government. And anyone who knows anything about the subject knows that Washington, D.C. is probably one of the most corrupt places on the face of the earth. There is more lies, deception, manipulation, exploitation, not just of the people of color, but for the whole entire world. The media in America are nothing more than lackeys for international banking cartels out of England. It's just a disgusting, and when I think about how many Americans were killed in New York City, and believing as I do that this thing was a setup job, because it's a textbook, as far as I'm concerned, this is a textbook operation that Nazis used, and they've used it over and over again. America has been suckered in one more time.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. President pro tempore, members of Congress, and fellow Americans. In the normal course of events, presidents come to this chamber to report on the State of the Union. Tonight, no such report is needed. It has already been delivered.
Der Führer, der sich als Träger seines besten Blutes fühlen und dieses Wissen zur Führung der Nation erhoben hat und entschlossen ist, die Führung zu behalten, wahrzunehmen und nicht erst abzugeben.
Junior Bush is asking for the authority to assassinate people. I'm talking about murder in the first degree. No trial, no evidence. I mean, this man is no Hitler, but if you liked what Hitler did, you're going to love what Bush is doing.
We've all seen the horrors of socialism. We've seen the results of what happened in
die von nun ab und für immer eine Gleichmäßigkeit der politischen Intentionen in Reich und in den Ländern gewährleisten. Es ist Sache des Reichstags nunmehr seinerseits eine klare Stellung einzunehmen. Am Schicksal des Kommunismus und der sich mit ihm verbrüdenden anderen Organisationen ändert dies nichts.
Our enemy is a radical network of terrorists and every government that supports them.
Minutes, President Clinton.
You can be very proud of the progress which has been made in the last couple of years, not just here in Washington with the crime bill, the assault weapons ban, and the Brady law, but on your streets.
What signs that you read in the press and things that you hear in the media tell you about what's coming next? And I submit that though most of it is disinformation, as you all know, a significant percentage of that disinformation will tell you, if you understand how to read it, what's coming. So we knew by the middle of last year that there was going to be probably something called a Reichstag fire episode, and those of you who know about Nazi history probably understand that that means an explosive political episode, terrorist episode, calculated to buffalo the people into accepting the giving up of their rights. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the reality is that throughout the 20th century, most totalitarian regimes have come into place through the voluntary acquiescence of the people. Surprisingly enough, more liberty is lost through the ballot box than through tanks. So what you have to understand is what are the signs, what are the kinds of techniques that are used to create these episodes. We figured by the middle of last year there was going to be a Reichstag fire, there was going to be an episode calculated to try to catapult the American people into a state of panic where they would give up their freedom in favor of tyranny.
Global government is what's coming. We also talked about a police state in America, especially after Oklahoma City.
Now, this year, in February, out came the key. That is the terrorism bill that makes sense of why you would have a Waco episode or why you would have an Oklahoma City episode.
I think it's important to know exactly what this September 11th thing has done.
We are witnessing the Nazization of this nation, and it's happening before your very eyes. To instill martial law, they have to have another incident, and it has to come within the next 90 days. A bacteriological, biological, or chemical warfare attack upon the United States of America.
Traces of anthrax were found at, of all places, the CIA, specifically its mail building. The bacteria was also found in the mailroom at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research.
It could even come through those briefcases with atomic devices, the red mercury codename. What is that all about? Would they use nuclear devices in this country? You're damned right they would.
We have been comparing things like proposals in the American House and Senate with proposals that were put forth in the Weimar Republic at the point of transition between the Weimar constitutional federal system and the Nazi totalitarian system. And there are lots and lots of scary similarities.
They passed this terrorism bill after Oklahoma City bombing. Did that do anything to stop what happened on September 11th?
And I'm going to tell you about the plan for an international criminal court. It's a court that is preparing to crush our own legal system, as flawed as that may be.
And for those of you who say, well, we think the militia did it, I can only say that's fine if you want to believe that, but use a little logic. In basic criminology, who do you look at, first of all, when you're looking for the culprit? Try the guy who benefits. Who benefits from Oklahoma City? Not the people, not the militia, but the government. Right?
They, the Cassius cartel, the Illuminazi elite, have a program. It really doesn't matter which party they're coming from. They're calling for world government. They're calling for tyranny. They're calling for you to take a mark on the back of the hand or in the forehead. Oh, first they'll offer you the plastic piece. And when people start losing it, you say, well, that's obviously not working. The terrorism is so bad and things are so horrible that we must surrender even more liberties for security. Will there be other craft that go out of the air? Of course. That's the program. It's their intent. And Oracle's Edison, what does he say? In the electronic age, well, there's little privacy left anyway. He says, well, all you'll have to give up is your illusions.
The Terrorism Act that was passed after Oklahoma City authorized the formation of a court.
Next, usually, in this kind of scenario, what you see is the legislative base, because, ladies and gentlemen, since most tyranny is lost voluntarily, in quotes, that means that there's a paper trail. And a significant part of that paper trail will appear in the public record. You don't have to go around corners. You don't have to steal things out of FBI buildings. It's there to be found if you have the patience and education to dig through the mountain of paper, because the way it's obscured is kind of like the way they hid the Ark in Raiders of the Lost Ark. It wasn't lost. It was just hidden amid hundreds of thousands of other boxes.
Specter promoted this trial, this UN trial of Saddam Hussein, for a specific purpose: to soften us up for the idea of having the International Criminal Court.
By January this year in radio shows, I was warning people, this year it's terrorism. This year the issue will be terrorism, because the end goal is an international court of justice that will take away all criminal law jurisdiction in the guise or under the argument that you can't fight terrorism without a new international court of criminal justice. That's the end game.
They've just arrested over 500. 500 are being people, we don't know who they are being held incognito, without a trial, without bond.
When you compare it to the comparable legislation in Germany, this one's worse. On the face of the record, the protective custody order that was the operative document for most of the early Nazi period from 1934 to approximately 1938 contained better guarantees of civil liberties than this bill that President Clinton has offered to the American people.
The Homeland Security Post is the creation of a national American Gestapo. The last head of the Gestapo was a guy named Mueller. Mueller is now head of the FBI. Mueller was the cover-up man for George Bush Sr. He's part of the trilateralist team. In fact, on Bush's transition team, Baby Bush had 9 out of 10 of his advisors from the Council on Foreign Relations. The sole exception, Richard Armitage, who's head of drug operations out of Southeast Asia for the Central Intelligence Agency. Richard Armitage has had heavy connections to both Bush administrations.
Get ready to go with me on a riveting ride down the Heroin Highway from Burma to Bush.
The film Air America reveals how George Bush's CIA dealt in heroin during the Vietnam War.
President Reagan has appointed Vice President Bush as the #1 policeman for controlling narcotic in the United States.
Colonel James Rambo Grice was the most highly decorated Green Beret hero in the Vietnam War. Bo's search for POWs and MIAs took him into the heart of the Golden Triangle.
I ask the White House aide, what about the offer from General Kunza to cooperate with the United States in reducing the narcotic and controlling the amount coming through this area?
You're about to hear from Colonel James Bo Grice that the Bush boys had no interest in solving the drug problem. None whatsoever.
The aide was very slow to answer. He said to me, Colonel Bo, there is no interest here in that matter. I know that the American CIA used opium and heroin to finance many of the operations in Laos, and in Cambodia. They financed the war using opium and heroin.
And after the Vietnam War, Richard Armitage was a prominent narcotic personnel, prominent trafficker in Bangkok.
In Bangkok?
Yeah, after Vietnam War. And this finance was being controlled, the finance support was controlled or given by Richard Armitage, who settled or who stayed in Vietnam.
Richard Armitage was George Bush's key man, trafficking in heroin out of Southeast Asia between 75 and 79. The National Guard would work with FEMA to become a national police, a Gestapo in your country, with your acceptance, under the guidance of Baby Bush. Do you really think that this man has the capacity to lead? Or is he simply following orders? Orders from the Faustian financial fraternity that controls this country.
Now, people will tell you, senators and congressmen will tell you not to worry. This bill just deals with foreigners. It's an anti-abuse of the immigration code bill, and it's calculated to get people like the Palestine Liberation Organization terrorists or the IRA out of our country. Don't believe it. The language of the bill is deviously clever.
But this court sits, and it's never been used. If a foreign national was arrested, picked up, came in here on any charges, he could be taken before this secret court, and I don't even like the sound of that. That kind of sends a chill up my spine.
The bill was so repulsive on its face that the man assigned the task of introducing it, Senator Biden, gagged as he introduced it and said in the congressional record that the bill, he was doing it because the president commanded him to do it, but that he was severely troubled by the bill because of the use of secret tribunals and the loss of liberty that it represented.
The UN Secretary General, Kofi Annan, who is being described in some newspapers as a man of peace. He and the United Nations want an international criminal court not to prosecute the communists, not the Chinese communists, but instead an international criminal court that could go after people like us. An international criminal court that could imprison Americans in foreign jails and put us on trial for judges from Communist China, Iraq, Libya, North Korea. This is the plan. And the charges against us could include genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, even the crime of aggression, whatever that may mean.
Certainly those who had prior knowledge about the World Trade Center attack would be guilty of murder if they didn't act upon it. Did Baby Bush and his administrators from the Council on Foreign Relations know that this was going to happen? Evidence supports that. It's all over the place. We have in excess of 200 stories on our website, Free World Alliance, supporting this thesis. But do you hear it on the major managed media? No, you hear a call for a war. People are saying we've got to go out and get those bastards. We've got to level them. But there's no trial. There's no evidence. There's a conviction by the President of the United States, just like there was a conviction by the President of Germany, the Fuhrer of Germany. As it was under Adolf Hitler, so it shall be under George Bush.
But Kofi Annan, the man of peace, and the UN don't want to prosecute them. No. They want to prosecute Americans for war crimes. We are on a fast track right now to the establishment of what I consider to be the most dangerous global institution we have ever witnessed or conceived, the International Criminal Court. President Clinton is strongly pushing it.
What this bill does is it sets the concept of due process of law and liberty back about 1,000 years.
This will be an international tribunal composed mostly of judges from foreign countries, including any member in good standing of the UN, Iraq, North Korea, Libya, Iran. They could all supply judges for this international criminal court who would have no respect whatsoever for our constitutional rights. Because consider this. The 7th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution affirms a right to trial by jury. There will be no jury trials before this International Criminal Court. None at all. We will be judged by the foreigners, including from terrorist and communist states.
When I talk to you a little bit more about what this bill really means, remember it's you or your neighbor or the person down the street that they're talking about treating in the manner that I'm describing. All right? Let's suppose that the lady in the front row in the black sweater is sitting at home one evening and there's a knock at the door and the INS comes and says, we're going to arrest you as a terrorist agent representative of a terrorist organization. And she says, first of all, well, how do I know that I represent a terrorist organization? And they'll say, because the President of the United States has determined which organizations are terrorist and which are not. And then she might say, well, what makes you think I'm their agent? And they'll say, because the Attorney General says that you are. And furthermore, there's no appeal of that determination. We say you are, therefore you are. Come with us, ma'am. And she says, well, just a minute, let me get my purse, the key element for ladies of your ID, or the wallet if you're a man. And they say, no, ma'am, we don't have time for that. Off you go. She is then locked up in a detention facility. Her lawyer doesn't get a phone call. Unlike the Nazi bills, her family isn't notified. There is no bond. There is no hearing to release her. She sits there until the process is done. While she sits in this jail cell, a secret hearing is held in the judge's chambers. In camera is the term for it. Ex parte. That means one side only is represented. She has no lawyer present. Her lawyer doesn't know she's gone, let alone the hearing is taking place. A representative of the Department of Justice hands the judge a series of documents and says, this is why we want this lady out. She's an alien. Again, as I said, it could be a sovereign. It could even be a mistake if it turns out that they've transposed a name or pretending that she's an alien, because after all, she doesn't have the ability to even get a hold of her handbag to prove that she's not. All this is going on while she's locked up, and perhaps her family has no idea where she is. They provide documents that they say, because of national security, in quotes, can't be released, and the judge signs an order, rubber stamp, okay, throw her out. The next phase under this proceeding is that she is to be deported to a country that will take her that is acceptable to the United States State Department. Now, the trick here is that that's a double-barreled test that only the government controls. If they can't find anybody acceptable to the government who will take her, guess what happens? She stays in jail. Guess how long? Forever. That's right, forever. All the government has to do at that point under this bill is to send her a notice every 6 months saying, sorry, Charlie, we haven't found a country acceptable to the State Department that will take you. This ranks as the most reprehensible piece of legislation I have ever seen. Now, the catch is that when the Nazis passed stuff like this, they conducted polls, because generally even totalitarians would prefer not to provoke a revolution. So the key issue now is, and I realize sometimes people say writing to Congress does no good, but this time it's going to count. The key issue now is, can we generate enough public opinion, enough public perception to stop this juggernaut, to scare the politicians, to make them realize that this is not the moment to wrap up the Constitution and burn up the Bill of Rights.
There will be an all-out assault upon your liberties, but you have to surrender your liberty for security, or the promise of security, by the same people who are perpetrating the crime. You think, well, how could this be? Why would they do that? Because they want a new world order. Hitler talked about a new world order. But Bush is no Hitler. He doesn't have the capacity to speak, to dramatize the situation, to emotionalize the people. But people believed in Hitler. People believe in Bush. People want to have security. American people are being told by the managed media that we're willing to surrender our liberty for security, that we're willing to take the mark, we're willing to take the ID card, we're willing to take that giant step towards fascism. Illuminati, Illuminazi. It's a National Socialistic program. But will you buy into it?
We have to make it abundantly clear to these turkeys that we will not stand for this, that we are not buying this game, that we are not good Germans, and that we demand our rights.
Once the national identification card is in place, it will become the ID card. Without it, you'll not be able to make deposits or withdrawals at the bank, write a check at the supermarket, or even drive your automobile. Soon thereafter, legislation will require all citizens to carry their national ID card at all times.
I think once you have a system where the government has to establish your identity by issuing an ID card, we have lost the initiative as a people.
In my humble opinion, I think we need to start looking at the Bush family and this entire monstrosity of murdering people in this country in order to frighten the country into accepting a new order in the world. We're Americans. I am absolutely appalled at how much people in this country do not think. We are given to understand that that an Arabic guy out there living in a tent out in Pakistan up in the mountains financed the most elaborate attack on this country when it's absolutely ludicrous.
We read in the papers that Bush is asking the Taliban in Afghanistan to surrender bin Laden. But the Taliban is asking, give us some evidence that he's responsible for these bombings.
There's been an explosion deep below the 110-story towers of the World Trade Center in New York City.
That he's responsible for the crash of the airliners into the World Trade Center.
The number one suspect, this man, Osama bin Laden.
Evidence? I mean, come on. Let's get real. No evidence, no trial. There's a conviction. And he's willing to send our troops into Afghanistan to mass murder, maim, and mutilate those people. Do they hate the United States? I would think that they should. Because the United States was financing the Russians at the same time the Afghans were laying down their lives for their freedom. Oh, we were financing both sides. The Mujahideen was financed by you, the American taxpayer. We were furnishing them in the war against the Soviets. We financed both sides. You say, well, why is that? Because we want to control the outcome. They lifted the ban that was imposed by Jimmy Carter on the Soviet Union because they were slaughtering all of these Afghanis. But when President Reagan, old Red Ronnie, Mr. 666 himself, who was so far left he made Fidel Castro look like a member of the Birch Society. Oh, that's not the image that you got him?
Transcends numbers.
They used to call him Red Ronnie in college. But he lifted the ban Soviets, allowing trade and aid to the Soviets, the communists, while they were slaughtering off the Afghans. And the Afghans thought, well, this is wonderful. The United States is coming to our aid. And who was some of the chief asset? Osama bin Laden. Can you believe that? Do you think that Bush and the boys were in bed with Osama bin Laden? I mean, business-wise. Do you think that Senior Bush was in bed with Saddam Hussein in the oil business? Oh, you might start thinking about that.
Bin Laden, Saddam Hussein, George Bush Sr. were all in business together. We're talking about business partners in oil companies. You know what we're talking about here? We're talking about big money. We're talking about high treason, crimes against the state, high treason against America, high treason. We're talking about the George Bush, bin Laden, Saddam Hussein. These men are all in business together. I'm just amazed at the treason that is going on in this country, and Americans haven't got the faintest idea in the world how to read the symbols and what the words mean. But I'm going to guarantee you something. There's going to come a day in this country very soon when we're going to wake up and find out that, well, all these people used to tell us, and they used to tell me all the time, oh, it could never happen in America. Yes, it happened in Germany, and unfortunately, yeah, there were a lot of Jews that were killed in the Holocaust, but it'll never happen in America. It's already happened in America. They just haven't told you yet.
We know one thing, that the Afghan war resulted in a continuation of the dope trafficking, heroin, out of Afghanistan. For certain, the Central Intelligence Agency, which was once headed by George Bush Sr., was trafficking in heroin to finance their operations. They were trafficking in heroin out of Southeast Asia when General Khun Sa in Shanland, which is in the heart of the Golden Triangle, was dealing with the Central Intelligence Agency. Khun Sa was asked who was the number one trafficker of heroin into the Western world. Who's the number one man? And they said Richard Armitage, CIA operative. Oh, Armitage. He was made Assistant Secretary of Defense under Ronald Reagan, personally appointed. Of course, George Bush was really in operation then. He wasn't simply vice president. He was acting as president. The CIA has always been the enforcement arm of the Council on Foreign Relations. Practically every head of the CIA has been a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. So what's it all about? Trafficking in dope, killing, mass murder, corruption, overthrowing free countries to impose dictatorships? That's been the course. Communist China is getting the benefit of our loss. They gain, we lose. They get stronger, we get weaker. Reagan and Bush Sr., transferred about $17 billion in nuclear and conventional hardware, military hardware, to the Communist Chinese, who have executed more people than any nation on the planet Earth. The Communist Chinese about Hitlered Hitler at the height of his hysteria. They've mass murdered in excess of 100 million people. They have some 23 million people used for slave labor. Oh, you go to the store and you buy these little products. We import slave labor and export our jobs. $1 billion a week in deficits. And you wonder why we're having an economic problem? That's not going to change with Bush. Bush's uncle, George's brother, is head of the U.S.-China Trade Organization. That's out of Beijing. And the Beijing butchers mass murdered people in the streets of Tiananmen Square. George Bush Sr. went around the next week or so and increased aid and trade to the communist cartels. They're the terrorists. But the war isn't going to be against the real terrorists. The war is being conducted against you and your family and those who speak out for freedom, those who disclose what's really happening behind the scene.
It's my humble opinion. If I get assassinated for saying it, just remember in America you can't give your public opinion anymore. In my humble opinion, the World Trade Center was sacrificed. Adolf Hitler was famous for saying that if you're going to frighten the people, you've got to give them a little blood, and you've got to make it look legitimate. You've got to make it look legitimate and scare them. So I think, it's just my opinion, but I believe that New York, the incident that happened at the World Trade Center, was a sacrificed plot against the American people to frighten the American people into accepting George Bush and the entire New World Order, Nazi, fascist, totalitarian dictatorship that these people have been planning for this country for a long time. And my suggestion, if I were being asked my opinion as to what we might want to do, my suggestion is this: don't ever give up your firearms.
The same FBI that helped the terrorists blow up the World Trade Center the first time, they built the bomb. They got the driver's license. It's all in testimony. It's available. Anybody that wants to see it, you can get the trial transcripts and find out that the FBI helped. The same FBI that's we've raked across the coals for years in the magazine for ineptness when their own chemists, when their own doctors, when their own lab technicians came forward and said they were doing it wrong. They were framing people. They figured out did it almost instantly.
Is the CIA an army of individuals who have a license to kill? It's like Murder Incorporated, right?
Oh, are you kidding? The CIA makes the mafia look like a Sunday school class. I mean, this is the problem with what's actually happening in Afghanistan. Look, the CIA has done in this country, what they've done to us is unbelievable. Look at the terrorist acts that have occurred. The CIA behind most, if not all of them. We had the Marine barracks. We had our embassy in Kenya. We had Pan Am 103. We had the USS Cole. We had Oklahoma City. We had the World Trade Center in 1993. Our government was involved in some of those. I can't say all of them because I don't know, but I do have documentation that there was government implication in some of these. And we'll discuss them as we go.
Well, Ted, the people out there, I mean did you know that the World Trade Center went up when it was bombed internally? That it all was put together by an organization called the FBI. Is that
This is 1993.
93.
Yeah. Yes, I have and I'll show this on camera, a newspaper article from the New York Times, and it was also an article in the LA Times, by the way, and it's dated October 28, 1993. And it's a result of testimony in the trial, and the informant, the FBI informant in the trial, a fellow named Salam, a 43-year-old former Egyptian army officer.
Imad Salam.
Right. He was the informant for the FBI. And he recorded his conversations secretly with this. So when it came time for trial, he said, hey, wait a minute, here's what really happened. Now, he told the FBI in advance that they were going to bomb it. He was assigned, given the assignment to put the bomb together. And he went to his supervisor, his FBI supervisor, and said, we're going to put a dummy bomb in here, right? And the FBI supervisor said, no, we're going to put a real bomb.
Oh, wait a minute. Let's name names. John Antisef.
Was the supervisor.
Yeah, he was the supervisor for the FBI, and he winds up in with having something to do with the Kenya investigation. So here's a guy who's involved in setting up the World Trade Center for to be blown up, and it resulted in the deaths of
Six
individuals, over 1,000 injured,
$500
nearly
million.
$100 million.
$500 million.
A lot of millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars, yeah.
And
in debt property damage.
Right. Now, if justice were done, the FBI agent would be not only in jail, but executed for murder in the first degree. And is the chief suspect in the attack upon the World Trade Center on September 11th, is not the chief suspect the individuals or individual agency that bombed the World Trade Center in 1993?
Based on what happened in 1993, the FBI not only knew in advance they were going to bomb the World Trade Center, they furnished the ingredients for the bomb. Based on that, I would say that the FBI is the primary suspect, but also I think we have to consider the CIA. And the reason you have to consider the CIA is because when you skyjack 4 airplanes simultaneously with 19 skyjackers, that is no small operation. That took years to plan, number one, and hundreds of people had to know about it in advance. Now, our government, NSA, was monitoring bin Laden's phone calls in February 1998. Are you going to tell me for 1 minute that we didn't know about this in advance? The CIA had to know about it. The FBI had to know about it. The Mossad had to know about it.
Now,
MI5, British intelligence, had to know about it.
The CIA knows about it. The FBI knows about it. The commander-in-chief, the president, would have to know about it.
Of course he does.
And that would mean that Bush had prior knowledge, and that would implicate him in reality, if we wanted to face this thing as it really is, in murder, in the first degree.
Let me explain to the audience what's happened here. Okay, back in the 80s, 1980s, the Department of Justice proposed legislation to fight terrorism. And this legislation took away many of our constitutional rights and civil liberties. One of the authors, a female attorney with the Department of Justice, publicly made this statement, I've got her name on my file someplace, that before this passes, people will have to be killed. Well, so that was the reason, I feel, for the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Unfortunately for them, fortunately for us, the good guys, there were only 6 people killed, not enough to pass the legislation. So what happened is 3 years later, no, 93, 2 years later, April 19, 1995, down comes Oklahoma City Murrah building, 168 people killed. 1 year later, the anti-terrorism legislation that takes away many of our constitutional rights and civil liberties is passed. And now with the Twin Towers World Trade Center episode, our Congress is now proposing further restrictions on our constitutional rights and civil liberties. These explosions, these terrorist acts, were an excuse to pass anti-terrorism legislation.
And then to implement it.
And then to yes. And this is what's happening in the world today. And that's why our intelligence people are not only knew about it in advance, but probably involved. There's no question. You cannot possibly have an operation of this magnitude without our people knowing about it. Now, our government, the FBI.
Well, when you say our government, and I got to challenge you. This isn't our government.
Well,
it's the banksters' government because they control both political parties.
The government knows the what, where, why, and when, and how. And I had a FBI supervisor brag about this to somebody else, and it got back to me, of every patriot and every militia in the United States. Now, if they know that, are you going to tell me that they're not going to know about the terrorists coming and going? By the way, this operation, based on information that's come out since the attack, the terrorist attack, was planned in England, London, England. The training took place in Afghanistan and in the United States. And these terrorists came in and took pilot training here. And as I said earlier, bin Laden's phone conversations were monitored, according to the press, in February 1998. Are you going to say they didn't monitor them after that? No, no.
Well, wait a minute, now.
The NSA employs probably 150,000 people. I don't know what their payroll is. I mean, it's the number of personnel. But they have taps on virtually everybody in America. This was part of the anti-terrorism legislation that was passed after Oklahoma City.
Well, that's exactly what Adolf Hitler did when he burnt down the Reichstag.
Well, why do you think they're trying to do away with the Second Amendment?
The day you give up your firearms to protect your family, your wife and your children and your home, I'm not advocating anyone killing anyone, but if you give up your firearms, the Nazis will march into this country and take this thing over lock, stock, and barrel quickly. The only thing that has kept America free, I believe, is that these people at the top, the Nazis and the fascists who have been waiting to destroy our country, the only reason they haven't made their move is because the guns in America represent the largest single armed camp on the earth as Americans. And I say don't ever give up your firearms, because when you do, you will begin to see quickly the complete and total collapse of America to the fascists and Nazis who are running this country from behind the scenes. Somebody better wake up. We are in serious trouble. I think the incident in New York was a staged incident, and the people who intend to enslave our country couldn't care less.
Well, they're trying to do away with the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, and Bush comes out, and what does he say? He says, well, we want, my administration, I'd like to lift that ban on assassinations so that I can have the authority to order the murder of my political opponents. He didn't say it exactly that way, but he says to stop terrorism so that we will have greater security, you are going to have to give up your liberty.
I was head of the FBI in Southern California for the most part, except for two southern counties in California, San Diego and Imperial County. I was in charge. I had over 700 personnel under my command. I had a budget of $22.5 million. We were the elite investigative organization of the world in our day. There's no question about who was responsible for the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center. Through their informant, Salam, the FBI informant Salam, they had control of whether or not to place a dummy bomb or a real bomb there. They placed a real bomb, and the reason they did was to pass the anti-terrorism legislation. There were only 6 people killed, not enough to pass the legislation. Now, by the way, the reason there were only 6 people killed is because the car bomb would be placed by a support beam of some sort, a pillar or a post, and there was another car illegally parked there, so they couldn't put the bomb exactly where they wanted. Otherwise, that whole Trade Center, the World Trade Center, would have come down at that time. That was their plan. So then, in 1995, we had the Murrah building in Oklahoma City, 168 people killed. Then, a year later, they passed the anti-terrorism legislation. But I'm telling you that the FBI knew about this, they had control of it, and did nothing to stop it.
These streets to be taken over by the Democrats or the Republicans.
G.W. Bush is a member of the Skull and Bones. He was initiated into the Skull and Bones at Yale University, born again into the Satanic Order. Most of the people in the Republican Party are unaware of this. They're unaware of his associations with the Council on Foreign Relations. There's been a film out called Skulls. The Bush boys have laid nude in the coffin of the Skull and Bones, born again into the Satanic Order.
Even the History Channel, in doing a television special on Nazism and Adolf Hitler, entitled the program A New World Order. And here we have the magazine on world conflict, and what do we see as Adolf Hitler, and the caption says A New World Order. We have Wall Street and the rise of Hitler. Who financed Hitler? American swastika. What we're talking about here are the people in power in this government are Nazis. No doubt in anybody's mind who has looked at this subject that the Bush family are heavily connected to the Nazi movement.
To understand why the Bush family financed both Adolf Hitler's Nazi movement and why they're doing billions of dollars of blood business with the butchers of Beijing, one has to understand the criminal mind and the mentality of the New England Illuminati. Their objective is to rule the world. The Illuminati elite is made up of men of power and prestige. Their symbols, rituals, and idols are satanic. They worship at the base of a 40-foot owl at the Bohemian Grove of Northern California. Agpu, the all-seeing eye of Lucifer, is placed over the Illuminati pyramid atop the privately owned Federal Reserve notes that they manufacture as money for the mindless masses. Their agenda is pure evil. Though they come from both Republican and Democratic parties, their political objective is the same. Their goal is to achieve world government through world war. World war in which they plan to sacrifice your sons and daughters, mothers, brothers, and fathers on the altar of the United Nations. They come from the Faustian financial families, which plunder and impoverish the poor to fatten the table of the rich. The Illuminatis intermarry to make sure the world's commerce and currency stays all in the family. Their managed media has got Americans psychologically set up, suckered, waving the flag, and ready for war. They've got them thinking that America is under attack from the Islamic world, when America's real enemy lives in plush penthouses from Manhattan to Miami, and in million-dollar mansions in Connecticut, Long Island, Bel Air, Grosse Pointe, and Palm Springs. They've got Americans shaking in their boots, afraid of anthrax and united through fear, flying the American flag and ready to surrender their liberty for Bush's promise of security. As it was under Hitler, so it is under George Bush. But make note, the Anglo-American Illuminazi will not be as kind or as merciful as Adolf Hitler, Joe Stalin, or Mao Zedong. They have no reservations at killing billions of innocent people.
The president signed into law a new anti-terrorism bill. Mr. Bush put his pen to paper this morning saying terrorists must be pursued, defeated, and brought to justice. Part of what the law does is to give police greater...
You are witnessing the Nazization of this nation.
I like to call it a national neighborhood watch.
And it's happening before your very eyes. As long as Americans fly their flags in fear that they will fall victims to some evil Islamic empire, they will continue to ignore the evilarchy that runs this country through the Council on Foreign Relations and that Cassius cartel that orchestrates these atrocities. Islam is being targeted as the fall guys because they hate the Manhattan money monarchy, not because they hate the American people. Unfortunately, most Americans are just too damn dumb to recognize that they are being led like lambs to be slaughtered on the altar of the Illuminazi's New World Order.
Oh my God!
The Cassius cartel that controls this country
the Illuminazi boom that operates through the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, underwrite both sides of the conflict.
What happened in New York, as far as I'm concerned, is nothing more than a textbook operation that I believe some of the most powerful and most evil men this country has ever produced has put together something for the American people that Adolf Hitler tried to pull off one time before. And Adolf Hitler called his conspiracy against the freedoms of the people of the world, he called it a New World Order. Go back and do your homework. Adolf Hitler was proclaiming a New World Order, and in order to frighten the world into accepting it, and he had to get the support of the German people. So in order to get the support of the German people, he burned down the Reichstag building. He burned down the government house, which is tantamount to burning down the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., or something. It has to be very severe. It has to be a huge loss of life. You've got to do something to get the American people's attention, to frighten them severely enough to accept the new order of the world, which is going to mean the loss of your freedoms. Very soon you're going to find in America that the military and the police are going to be able to just not knock on your door. They don't have to have warrants. From very soon we're going to begin to see the same thing that happened in Nazi Germany is going to happen again.
I take a look at the statement by Senator John Warner. He says it's another Pearl Harbor for this country. It is another Pearl Harbor. In spite of what Dan Rather said, he said, no, this is not another Pearl Harbor. It is. I wrote a book with Colonel Curtis B. Dowd, Roosevelt's son-in-law, about President Roosevelt's prior knowledge to the Pearl Harbor attack. Just as the Pearl Harbor attack was known by the President of the United States, so has this attack upon the World Trade Center been known by the President of the United States.
They didn't care anything about Vietnam. We certainly didn't care anything about Bosnia or in Cambodia or Laos or anywhere else. The people who are running this country from behind the scenes do not care a thing about Americans or bloodshed anywhere. They are the most violent, dirtiest people on the face of the earth. Somewhere Americans are going to have to take their country back and start finding out who are these people. Who are these people we call our representatives, the Bushes? Somebody better do their homework. George Bush, the president, his father, went around the country talking about a new world order. His grandfather was Prescott Bush. Prescott Bush was with Brown Brothers Harriman. Brown Brothers Harriman, Prescott Bush, President Bush's father, all of these people were connected to the Nazi Party. When George Bush left the CIA and becomes President of the United States, the CIA walked into the White House. And what was the first official act now that he's president? He meets with Gorbachev, another murderer. This guy was the head of the KGB. They murdered women and children, slaughtered people all over Russia. And George Bush meets with his counterpart for the KGB, and they hug and kiss each other's rings. And today, Gorbachev is up in San Francisco. We're treating him like a wonderful American. These people are traitors to the human race. And Americans sit here and watch this stuff go on every day, and we haven't got the faintest idea in the world what's coming down.
While the Illuminati's managed media is controlling the synthesis of this attack upon America, George Bush has crocodile tears. And they're presenting him as a hero. And the Star magazine talks about our heroes, but over on the side it says President Bush moved to tears about this whole damn thing. The righteous indignation, the cry for war. Send the troops into battle. Let's get the terrorists. Let's eliminate them. Let's have a war against all those who dissent against the United States of America. This is a war against Islam, but Islam is an obstacle to world government. The Muslims have to be terminated. But they're saying, oh, no, let's not get prejudice. Let's be honest. Let's be friendly with these good people. But the President of the United States wants to terminate these people. Now it comes to the time when we must get in bed with individuals who are seeking freedom against this oligarchy of evil, against this Illuminazi elite, against those who are trying to bring about world government upon the ashes of all national sovereignty. We must align. We must have a free world alliance to protect the linguistic, religious, racial, political nation states that deserve to be free. A lot of people are going to die in this war. But we must declare war upon those who have declared war upon us. It's not our right to overthrow the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. But it is our duty to overthrow those who would overthrow the Bill of Rights and the Constitution of the United States. It's stated quite clearly in our Declaration of Independence.